It's a good night. It's only going to get better. I told Bob. Bob called me and said he might be a little late. He asked the wrong person who's later than he was to cover. Yeah. Uh huh. Right. Yeah, we drove the truck and Lucas sat in the middle so you can see the speedometer. He said something about going 60, which is unheard of, I'm sure. Yeah. He doesn't know that's really not that fast. Well, I told Bob I would tell jokes until he came if he was late. So be thankful he wasn't late. But maybe he'll tell some jokes. Brother Bob, it's your turn, buddy.
Uh, Not a very big crowd, right? But everybody's going to be into this, aren't they? Can everybody hear me okay? Tim? Lonnie? John? Oh, you want me to talk a lot louder? Because I really can't. All right. Okay. Well, I'll tell you what, Mike, if you would, just kind of ask blessing on the lesson. Let's see. All right. So, who's who has busy lives? John, is your life busy? No, not too much. I don't know. I feel like mine is. I had big plans when Tyler asked me to teach us last Wednesday. I was like, yeah, I'll get started right on that, and I'll have this great little outline and stuff to go by. And I don't know if it was just me procrastinating or me actually really being busy and having a lot of things to do. 2 o'clock in the morning, and this morning, I'm like, so I don't know what you're getting, honestly. I'm not sure what actually came out of my fingertips and made its way to this page. I do know that I probably wrote too much of a retrospective on chapter 4, but it might not be too bad a thing, I don't guess. Um, I don't know if we're going to be here for a little time or for a long time. Um, I guess you guys can always just shut the lights out and walk out and leave if I go too long. But we've been doing Romans, I just kind of a chapter by chapter go through, right? And last week we did Romans chapter 4. And kind of who remembers some of the things and main takeaways from our study of Romans 4? There's something that they call this doctrine of imputed righteousness, right? So, um, chapter 4 gave us some great examples, and among the examples, who remembers some of the examples that were given to us as these people of faith who received righteousness, and for what that righteousness was imputed upon them for. It was for their belief, and Paul spoke about Abraham and Sarah, and what was one of the promises that he made to Abraham? Father of many nations. So did he also make a promise that would include Sarah in that? She would bear a child, right? Okay. So what made that actually miraculous? They were really old. They were really, really old. It wouldn't have been a miracle if they had made that, if God had made that promise to a couple of 25-year-olds. But to make it to people upwards of 80 or 90, and I know we're kind of hitting that spot where in the genealogies, people aren't living for centuries anymore. Both of these guys, Abraham and Sarah, had kind of reached this point where, oh, another kid's probably out of the question for us. And then God shows up on the scene and says, Abraham, we're going to make you a father of many nations. Sarah, you're going to conceive a child. And she conceived no children, right? Here she is, 80. What do we decide? How many years old? She was, yeah, she was quite old. So Sarah's womb was barren. I think that they even described it as being dead, right? So God comes, he makes this promise, and Isaac is given to them. And Isaac is a new life out of a very old and dead womb. Quite a miracle, right? So, do you think Sarah was able to do that on her own? Did they have like in vitro specialists back in the day, fertility specialists that she went to, a guy with a shingle, a OBGYN somewhere out there? Oh yeah, which is probably got to be much worse. I know I know the difference between getting out of bed at 50 and 25 is. Just the process of getting out of bed is painful. I can't imagine being 80 years old and trying to deliver a baby. Quite a miracle, though, right? Why did God impute righteousness to Abraham in this situation? Hey, we talked about it last week, and it was your idea.
Then you wait, you get the promise, and you wait long, he decides to take
I think that we kind of talked about, and I'll maybe modify analogies a little bit, but as he was getting down to those kind of final grains of sand in that hourglass, which would be his life, did he become more or less convinced that this thing was still going to happen in his lifetime? Right. I believe that he just realized, boy, this is going to happen sooner than later, because later's already back here, or sooner's already behind us. I believe that the closer that he got to the end of his own life, or what he would project to be the end of his own life, he became more and more confident that this was going to happen, and it was going to happen soon. Which takes a lot of faith, because it didn't happen for so many years. To maintain that belief and that trust, I think does make him a good example, even though we picked on him a little bit last week.
If the promise doesn't come today, that's okay. So closer, one day closer to that promise than I was
Yeah,
yesterday.
I do not believe I am going to die until this thing happens. I will be alive until I see my child born of Sarah, because God told me that I would have a child with her. So I'm not sure that he woke up every day and was like, oh man, I hope I don't die today because that kid ain't here. She's not even pregnant. She's not even with child. I truly believe that in spite of the weight, he was still able to maintain a strength and conviction in his belief and his trust that God did not lie to him when he made that promise to him. Agreed? All right. So the other example from chapter 4 was David, and a verse that Paul cited, was that David said, "Blessed are those whose iniquities are forgiven and whose sins are covered. Blessed is the man to whom the Lord will not impute sin." So I don't think that we went this direction too much with these verses last week, but something that I started to kind of think about was how miraculous, how amazing it is that God can, able, you used the word able last week, a belief that God is able to do this. I find it pretty miraculous that God is able to forgive us of the sins that we commit. Because if we think of, merely for the sake of believing that he is able to forgive us of our sins, I can think back of so many times in my life that somebody kind of stepped on my toes or hurt me or did something wrong against me. And I was devising and plotting all these stipulations, of what this person has to do in order for me to forgive them. And I don't know if anybody else plays that out or not in their life, but oh, you know what? If he writes an open letter to the newspaper that says that he was responsible, that he was a horrible and evil person, and that he did this bad thing, and then bought every copy of it and distributed it to, then I could forgive him. Do I? Yeah, but see, the thing is I am devising that this guy has to do this in order for me to forgive him. He has to tell the world what a horrible, rotten person he was in order for me to forgive him. God doesn't impose that same set of stipulations on us, right? So what is God's stipulation in order for him to forgive us? That we believe that he is able to forgive us, and that we trust that he will forgive us, merely for the sake of all we have to do is believe that he is able, and believe that and trust that he will, right? He doesn't make us do all the silliness of things that I think of that I would make people to do in order for me to humble them. You know, when they've done me wrong, I may be the only person here that is like that. By show of hands, cameras on me, not you. Who has ever kind of harbored this resentment towards somebody who has done you wrong, that you did not want to forgive them, and that you put all kinds of conditions upon you forgiving them, upon them doing something more than just coming and saying, I'm sorry, please forgive me? We got two honest people in the room. Yeah. Okay, is there a third? I got a third, fourth. Anybody else? Yeah. So, yeah, what I'm trying to do is kind of draw this great contrast between who we are and who God is. What we require of people in order for us to forgive them, and what God requires of people and us in order to forgive us and them. We require a whole lot more than God requires. We require a whole lot more of people than He requires of us and them. Who else do we find it very hard to forgive? Perfect answer. Sometimes don't we? Now, how many people have done that? Cameras here, you guys back there, nobody sees you. Who has had trouble forgiving themselves for something that they have done? Is it easier for God to forgive you of that thing, or you to forgive yourself of that same thing? And what do we have to do for God to forgive us of that thing that we can't forgive ourselves of? Merely believe that He is able to forgive us and trust that He will forgive us.
What we can become. I mean, he sees the potential in each one of us. And He knows we're human beings and we mess up, but He also knows that you could be a great speaker someday. You could be a great singer someday. You could be a great preacher or missionary someday.
Yeah. It's been quite a few years ago now, but statutes, limitations, all that stuff are expired. I actually got in trouble when I was like 18, 19. I had gone out for a motorcycle ride without an endorsement or anything like that. So you drive up by the pool on Thomas Hollow in Lucasville, pull out there, pull up to, it was Rose Hill Road back then. I think it's fallen timber now, but make a turn. I'm just out joyriding. Look in the mirror and there's a state patrolman behind me. And I'm automatically thinking, wow, it's going to cost me this much because I'm out here without the endorsement. I'm not wearing glasses, no helmet. I don't know about even the whole insurance situation on it. It wasn't even my bike. So having this thought, I'm busted. Like 18, you ain't got any sense. You're stupid. Like, well, I'm going to drop this thing a gear and I'm going to take off and see what I can do against this Crown Victoria. I ended up taking the motorcycle places the motorcycle should have never gone. But there's this little thing is about this big that hangs on the back of that motorcycle, and there's this radio in that car, and all they've got to do is read like 5 numbers and a letter off of this little thing, and they can call it in, and they can figure out who owns that motorcycle and stuff, and they can tell that the guy on the motorcycle is not a 40-ish year old man like my dad, that it must be probably somebody else in his house. I ended up running, getting away kind of, but having the license plate. So they show up at the house and they tell my dad, hey, if you have him down here by such and such time, we won't issue a warrant for his arrest. Okay. So we go down there, and the John Woodford was the state patrolman. And several years later, I was at a funeral viewing. I got in line behind him, and I thanked him actually for kind of the way he treated me, because I was a nervous wreck being taken down there to the patrol post by my dad. And he was like, you know what? Yeah, this kid, he's 18 years old. We know they're dumb. You know, Jack, you know he's dumb. We're not going to beat him up too bad. He wrote like the minimum ticket that he could write, I guess. But I thanked him because he could have been dealt with me very harshly, and he didn't. And yeah, I think that was a good lesson in human compassion and stuff. I can't remember exactly what I was trying to get to bring more to the point that you were making, but maybe that state patrolman saw some potential in me. You know, hey, I don't need to throw this guy in the county clinker or whatever for days. You know, he's already learned a lesson. I can kind of see in the little quiver in his voice, maybe. So God definitely standing outside of time can see potential in us that we cannot see in ourselves, and maybe sometimes nobody else can see in us either. I don't know. Did that add anything at all to the point that you were making about God seeing potential in us?
Bob, you come to think about Abraham and what we've been studying, and God knows the future. He knows how Abraham's life was going to unfold. And I think that God gives us the patience that maybe we need at just the right time. Maybe he gave Abraham those patience. He gave Abraham the, whatever it was, just hang in there, that my promises are going to unfold in your time. As you were explaining a while ago that Abraham was not going to see death, it reminded me also of Simeon. That God made that promise to Simeon that you won't see death until you see the Christ.
Right.
And so Simeon, every day he can wake up and know that, well, I'm still alive. I'm going to live until I see him.
Yeah.
And I think God gives us what we need and when we need it, how much we need.
We kind of said a couple of weeks ago, but if God didn't use his time and wait so long, where it's impossible that these things should happen, that he might not get the glory that's due.
Yeah, we wouldn't recognize it for what it is. Yeah. Or that happens all the time. Nothing special. Move along. He does have to create a circumstance wherein it's beyond the power of man to do. And at the end, you just kind of sit back and look and go, that had to be God that did that thing on that day, because nobody else could have done what I saw happen. So
God's timing is impeccable. I mean, it's hard for us to grasp that maybe we need to go through this trial, we need to go through this challenge, we need to face this issue in our lives, because God sees something in us that whenever I get to the top of the ladder, you're going to be, man, you are going to be just right for the picking. But you have got to take every step to get up there to it.
Yeah. You know, I think that I am kind of on the right track, just kind of based on the input that we have, Connie's testimony talking about, sometimes people get knocked down to their knees. And I kind of laughed when I saw that, because there's a part in this outline where I talk about people, where God allows people to be put on their back in order for them to get them to look up. And then there's going to be a spot where I talk about views from valleys and views from mountaintops, and how the most underappreciated part is that space that lies between the valley and the mountaintop. So we're going to bust through some stuff. I don't know what time we're trying to typically get done, but let's do the first two verses of chapter 5. And it says, "Therefore, being justified by faith, we have peace with God through our Lord Jesus Christ, by whom also we have access by faith into his grace, into this grace wherein we stand and rejoice in hope of the glory of God." So I just kind of went to the dictionary and I looked up some of these big words. And justified. So it says, therefore being justified. And justified means to be declared or made righteous in the sight of God by faith. And faith is defined as to have complete trust or confidence in someone or something. We have peace. So peace is defined as tranquility, a freedom from disturbance, and or a state or period wherein there is no war, or wherein a war has ended. So we have peace with God through our Lord Jesus Christ, by whom we also have access by faith again. So faith again is to have complete trust or confidence in someone or something. Into this grace. And grace is defined as an unearned, undeserved gift that has been given to man by God for the sake of saving man from the penalty of his own sins, wherein we stand and rejoice in hope. So hope's not really a big word, but conceptually kind of understanding what it is and how it's defined, I think adds a little bit to our understanding of these verses. So hope is a feeling of expectation that requires strong belief and a desire for a certain thing to happen. So for us to rejoice in hope of the glory of God. So glory of God, I think in the first 4 verses, glory is used a couple of times. Contextually, I think that we need to kind of adapt it for what's trying to be said. And I think in this word, to rejoice in hope of the glory of God, that is the manifestation of God's presence. Does that sound about right? Or does anybody disagree with that? Maybe. I don't know. Oh. Okay. Sorry about that. So I thought, well, you know what, maybe let's take these 2 verses and substitute in the definitions for the words and see what we kind of get out of it. So it says, therefore, being declared righteous in the sight of God by our complete trust and confidence in him, we have tranquility and freedom from war with God through our Lord Jesus Christ.
Okay, stop right here. I'm not seeing that you said it. Therefore, being justified by
Faith.
By whose faith?
Our faith.
Our faith. So declared. What did you say? Having been declared righteous
In the sight of God by our complete faith. Trust and confidence in him. So faith being defined as our complete trust and confidence in him. We have tranquility and freedom from war with God through our Lord Jesus Christ, by whom also we have access by our complete trust and confidence in him into this undeserved gift of salvation, wherein we stand and rejoice in expectation of bearing witness of the manifest presence of God.
All of that hinges.
It does. And then what I end up trying to do is I'm going to pull out what faith consists of, right? So it does absolutely, the central axis, all of that happens and revolves around that central tenet of faith. But now we got to kind of figure out what faith is. I think that we'll get there maybe in the next page or so, but essentially in this, I think, can we be justified without faith? Cannot be justified without faith. We cannot have faith without belief. We must have belief in him to have faith. True? We cannot have faith without trusting in him. Is that true? So we must trust in him to have faith. Okay. If we do not believe in God and we do not trust in God, then we do not have faith in God. If we lack belief and trust in God, then we cannot be justified by God. True? Is that true? If we are not justified by our belief and trust, which is our faith, then we cannot have peace with God. Still true? The only way for us to have peace with God is to be justified by God by our faith, and we do not have faith lest we have belief in him and trust in him. Mm-hmm. But as I read these two verses, it's that justification by our faith, by which we can live peaceably, have peace with God. Therefore, being justified by faith, we have peace with God. So could we say, therefore, not being justified by faith, we do not have peace with God? Can we have peace with God without being justified by faith? I don't think so. And what do we need to have faith? Belief. I think I liked what you brought out last week. We have to believe in his ability to do a thing, and we have to have trust in his ability to do that thing. So if we're not at peace with God, then what are we with God? Are we at war with God? So he will not force his will upon us, right? Yet, kind of at the same time, we will try to wrest our will upon our lives. So I think that there may be a little bit of a battle between any given person who's not at peace with God for control of our own lives. Okay. So if we're not at peace with God, then we're at war with God. I have personally never met anybody who's ever gone to war with God and won. And I know somebody who did go to war with God and lost. Do you care to guess who that guy is? This guy. I put up a heck of a fight. And March 26, 2017, he made himself so evident. Well, March 19th, really, I guess, but so evident that I could not deny the fact that I was wrong about everything that I thought that I knew about him. And
Do you think you were under control of your life? And so that control to him?
In part, a lot of my problem kind of stemmed from the fact that I was working emergency medicine at the time, and I got to see some of the worst things that people do to themselves and each other, and so I really struggled with this idea of, God, why am I cleaning up these messes that you could have prevented from happening? You know, so that's kind of where I was. Right or wrong, you know, it challenged my belief in him, his goodness, my trust in him, his power to intervene, his personhood, a personal relationship with any of us individually, and his knowledge and understanding of what goes on within any particular one of us. And that's where it got so personal, because I was like, hey, there's no way a personal God, you know, that's ever present, all powerful, all loving. Why doesn't he intervene on these impositions of one person's will upon another? You know, why did he allow this person to be shot, or allow this person to be beaten by a baseball bat? And why did I have to change shirts? Because there was so many bodily tissues. So I did struggle with that. But, you know, so I was like, there's no way there's a personal God in this universe. And then I come here, and nobody knew that I was coming here. This was just my way of showing up, trying to save my marriage, trying to say, hey, Charity, you can have your Jesus club, and I'll sleep in. And when you get home, we'll have a nice dinner. And I'm cool with you doing your thing on that, but I don't want any part of it. So, you know, I show up and say, I'm going to just watch you take membership in the church, and that's good. Oh, good for you. I'm out of here, and I ain't coming back. And then for PJ at the time to use the words of the last spoken testimony that I'd given like 4 years before at Swagger, I was like, good grief. Now you're just mocking me, because the only person I can't beat in an argument is myself. And it was my own words coming back to me out of PJ's mouth in a totally different church. I was like, somebody's taking notes, and that just doesn't happen, you know. So I was like, well, I guess that is a personal God that can pull out just. And my thoughts and ideas aren't like most people's. A lot of times, but um, like the last words that I'd spoken in any type of testimony, and it was I call it more of a respectimony. Bill Hutchinson, I don't, a lot. Some people might know. Well, definitely know Bill here. Um, he had stepped down from a treasurer's position because he was ill. I knew that he was ill. I loved Bill, and you know, the Mike Simpson had preached about the potter's wheel, and then I kind of took that thought and ran with it a little bit about the physics of the wheel and how God makes vessels out of us and stuff. And I was like, at the end, Bill, I can definitely tell God's had his hands on you and he's filled you up and you've got depth. And I come in here just to make my last appearance in a church to tell my wife, hey, go girl, whatever. And my own words came back to me. I could not say anymore that God was not personal. Does that make sense? All right. So can we receive grace without faith? Cannot. It's by grace through faith that we're saved, right? We must have faith to receive grace. Faith is to have complete trust or confidence in someone or something. Hope is a feeling of expectation that requires strong belief and a desire for a certain thing to happen. And trust is a firm belief in the character, strength, or truth of someone or something. Trust is also defined as confident hope. So, he did, yeah. Not on the ride down. I was pretty much like, hey, on that ride down. Oh yeah, hey, it was one of those things. That it was unspoken, but it was like, Dad, I'm going to be going away for a while. I hope that you guys will write. Maybe come visit me. Hey, I lived in Lucasville on Thomas Hollow. I pictured myself up on Lucasville Medford Road on the little plateau there, not far from where the new Valley High School sits. But that's where I imagined myself. I was like, good night. I've done run from the cops on a motorcycle without insurance and without head protection and glasses, and I'm probably going to J Block in Lucasville. Thankfully,
To receive that grace.
you know, where it really kind of settled in was that he and Dad both just laughed with each other at me. And I was so relieved to be laughed at by both of them, because there was a certain amount of understanding that was like, from the guy with the uniform and the badge to my dad. Yeah, you know what? He's young and stupid now, but you and we were young and stupid then. You know? So they didn't. I think coming to him, humbly, good grief, I'm sorry that I did this. I was scared. I thought that the um, financial penalties or whatever would be far worse. Um, oh yeah, yeah, yeah. So, like I said, I thanked him. I was like, I don't know if you remember me or not, but I rode right out there. So, he had some vague recollections. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So, we can only stand and rejoice in the presence of God by the grace that He has given us for the sake of our belief in Him and our trust in Him, His Son, and His ability to raise His Son from death into life. So God imputes righteousness unto those who believe and trust that he is able to perform amazing and glorious acts. I did not think that he could perform a amazing and glorious act that day that I came in here. I was pretty darn sure that I would walk out of here and never, ever, ever darken a door of a church again. And 4 years now, still here. So he imputes righteousness upon us for our belief in him and our trust in him and his abilities to perform the things that he says that he can perform. I think that we can read into this that God imputes sin unto those who disbelieve and distrust that he is able to perform amazing and glorious acts. I don't know. Maybe. We certainly aren't getting extra credit. One cannot be righteous in God's eyes if they disbelieve in God's ability to perform amazing and glorious acts, and one cannot be righteous if they do not trust God to perform such righteous or such amazing and glorious acts. I had here the skeptic cannot fully trust God because he does not fully believe in God. And the cynic cannot fully believe in God because he cannot fully trust in God. Now, I know we've got a whole bunch of people super strong in their faith, never wavering, not a degree either way, not shifting an ounce either way. Strong in their belief every single day, strong in their trust every day. We would never, ever be somebody that would doubt God for a minute or distrust God for a minute. Or maybe I'm just kind of being a little bit sarcastic and saying that I think all of us probably have some moments in our lives where doubt does kind of creep into our minds and our thoughts about God. Anybody have those moments? Or is it just me? I'll admit to them. Yeah. So when we started this study, Tyler and I started having at the end of the service, we kind of come together and start bouncing ideas off of each other. And one thing that I raised is this question: is faith a work? I've got an opinion about it. It's too late to tell everybody about it. I do have an opinion about it. I will say this, that I don't think that either one of us really kind of came to the point where we could give definite proof. Hey, faith is a work, or faith is not a work. I don't think that we proved that either one of us to the other, whether it is or isn't. Faith just being our belief and our trust. Strong belief and our trust. I think that the one thing that I could probably say without any controversy or dispute at all with Tyler is that we both agree that grace is a gift. Is faith a gift or is faith a work? I don't know. Don't know if it matters. But the point that I wanted, the point that I made to myself in this study was that one thing that I know is that faith does take work. Right?
When I see my
You've got to present your faith first. You've got to present your faith first. Yeah. Yeah, if it's by grace through faith, that faith has to be there before grace can be given. Yeah. So the actual thing that I typed was the one thing that I think that we can all agree on is this: faith does take work to maintain and to grow. I think too often we can be just kind of persuaded by circumstance and too focused on circumstance and too negligent to recognize when God's hand has been in something. And our memories get very short sometimes about those things. Too often, I believe, just by personality or whatever, I'm probably inclined to be a bit of a skeptic, and I'll even tilt towards cynicism sometimes. I'll, it takes a lot to convince me of anything and to cause me to believe in something, and sometimes it takes even more for me to trust in someone or something. My experience here, March 19th, 2017, falling over for an additional week. That was a lot of a thing to happen to one person, but it was the exact thing that had to happen to this person. I was angry. I was just mad. Just mad. Um, it's 10 after 8. We're gonna tidy it up here. For 2 verses, well, I know we spent a lot of time in chapter 4, but there is kind of a lot to unpack there.
I think our personality worries much about. Whereas some people's personality is.
Yeah, I entirely believe that.
To just take it at face value and just the rest of it.
Yeah.
Don't do it.
Um, there's so much competing for our time, attention, affection, and it's not terribly hard to persuade us to go another direction. I think it's not too difficult for our thoughts to be turned to things that are happening out there, and during the time that we're in here, you know. And I guarantee you, most of the time when we're out there, we ain't thinking about anything about what goes on in here. Um, so it's not hard. Um, and if we can get, if our minds can be taken off of these things, they can kind of readily be consumed by other things. And all of a sudden, we got to defragment the hard drive. I empty out the trash can and the cache memory and all of that stuff. Otherwise, yeah, for me, my days, my words out of a man's mouth who wasn't there 4 years prior, that kind of makes a bit of an impression upon you. But there's all kinds of other things that kind of go on that God's hands are in. Don't really too much look at them or consider them or remember them or put them in this checklist of things that, boy, I'm so thankful that God did this thing on that day, and that in verses 3 and 4, we'll slam through them. It says, and not only so, but we glory in tribulations also, knowing that tribulation worketh patience, and patience experience, and experience hope. So glory in this context is that we win honor by notable achievements. And tribulation is a state of great trouble or suffering, and patience is the ability to accept or tolerate delay, trouble, or suffering without getting angry or upset, which, hey, Abraham cornered the market on that. I don't. I don't wait. I struggle to wait. But the experience, the practical contact with and observation of facts and events, sometimes we have to wait out that whole period patiently and then experience that miracle that they got with Isaac, or, that Pat got with Lonnie. Boy, 40 years is a long time. Charity suffered 4 years with me, and she's about to, she's gonna slap me around. I drove her nuts. I can't imagine. Even good Lonnie kind of probably drives you nuts, doesn't he? But hope being a feeling of expectation that requires strong belief and desire for a certain thing to happen. This is the dichotomies of knowing. Can we know what's good without knowing what's bad? Can we know what's right without knowing what's wrong? Can we know what's true without knowing what's false? Can we know what's false without knowing what's true? Can we know what it means to be strong if we've never known what it is to be weak? We know what it is to be weak if we have never known what it is to be strong. This is that patience and experience that God uses circumstances to teach us lessons and to give us these experiences. I quoted an old Roman Stoic philosopher, Seneca. He said that we suffer more in imagination than we do in reality. And sometimes it is the way that we feel about a particular situation that hurts us more than the hurt that was caused by the particular thing that was done. Start to focus on our anger about a thing, or our own feeling about a thing. And because our focus has gone to that feeling about that thing, we lose sight and maybe don't learn the lesson that God would have us to learn from the situation that He's allowed us to fall into. When you guys walk around, do you look up or do you look down? I always find myself looking down. I'm walking around, I'm looking at the ground 8-10 feet in front of me. Until I took up bird watching as a habit, as a hobby. Now that Charity's in school, Kinsley's got a boyfriend, she's on the phone all the time, Charity's studying all the time. It's me, the dogs, and the birds. Now I look up a little bit. But Connie talked about getting somebody needing to be knocked down to their knees. And this is the part where I said, I tell patients all the time, sometimes things, they say, I don't know why this happened to me. I say, you know what? Sometimes God has to allow you to be put down on your back so that the only place that you can look is up. You're walking around all the time. You're always looking down. You're never looking up. Now, God has put you on your back so that the only place that you can look is up. And the last thing, we talked about that space between valleys and mountaintops. If life was a level playing field, then none of us would know the experiences of the mountaintop or those of the valley. From the tops of mountains, even valleys can be beautiful. And from valleys, tops of mountains can be beautiful. But it's that space between that valley and that mountaintop where we spend most of our lives. Do not tend to appreciate them for their beauty, that struggle of that climb, or that softened landing that God arranged for you. You know, we fail to see a whole lot of life and a whole lot of lessons because we're always wanting to get out of this place and up to that place, but we don't pay enough attention to the process of getting from there to here. We're done. We are done. Sorry for going late. I hope that some of this made some sense. I don't know. We have needs for cereal, tea bags, and face masks for the kids at the camp. And at some point in time, I think Charity has volunteered Kinsley and KJ to do some painting in cabins. So I don't know when that is exactly planned for, but for the better part, anybody could tell us at any time and we'll get them there. Alrighty. Lance has his hands full with child. Tim does too. Lonnie, you want to close us out?